Hello, students. You are welcome to session 3 of Unit 3. And in this session, we will be looking at Tabes model of curriculum planning. My name is Patrick Eje. Now, at the end of this session, you should be able to state Tabes 7 elements of curriculum planning, explain each of the 7 elements of curriculum planning, then compare Tabes model with Tyler's model and state the differences between them, if there are some differences. So let's look at Tabes model. Now, Tabes work represents a detailed elaboration of the Tyler's rationale. So we saw that Tyler's model was made up of 4 phases, and in Taba, the phases are now 7, which means that the Tyler's 4 phases has now been expatiated into the 7 phases presented by Taba. And these phases, like Tyler, Taba also accepts the assumption that curriculum planning is technical. Or when we say technical, it means it's more a scientific activity rather than a political matter. And when Taba mentions that curriculum planning is more technical or a scientific activity, then she intends to say that whenever it comes to scientific development of curriculum, we have to draw upon the analysis of the needs of the society, the needs of the learner. All these come into play before we determine the various contents of the curriculum. And Taba also accepts the assumption that learning is the ultimate purpose of schooling. So we go to school and the main purpose of schooling is to learn. Now let's look at Tabe's 7 steps. And Tabe's model, because it is made up of 7 phases, is more detailed and made up of 7 steps, and the steps follows an order. So note that the manner in which the steps will be given shows an order of the phases. And the first step, or the first phase of Tabe's model, is the diagnosis of needs. The second step is the formulation of objectives. The third phase, or the third step, talks about selection of content. The fourth one talks about organization of content. 5, selection of learning experiences. The 6th step talks about organization of the learning experiences. And the 7th step, which happens to be the final phase, talks about the determination of how to evaluate and the ways and means of doing the evaluation. So we must take note that this is an order. So we cannot start from organization of content without having diagnosed the needs of the learner, the needs of the society. So that is for Taba. And when looking at this, you realize because of the orderly nature of the phases, Tabe's model is also a linear model. Now let's take the various phases and look at what each phase entails. So with diagnosis of needs, here Taba is of the view that the essence of designing curriculum is for the students to learn. And so their backgrounds, we know that students' backgrounds vary. And it is important to diagnose the various gaps, the deficiencies, and the variations in these backgrounds. We know that the learners are coming from different backgrounds, some from economically good homes, some too are from poor homes, some too are from rural areas, others are from urban areas. We must try to identify the gaps in all these backgrounds before we can formulate or we can plan or design the curriculum. And it is therefore reasonable to state that diagnosis is an important step because it helps to determine what curriculum should be given to a population or a group. So without diagnosing the needs, you may design a curriculum and and you present the curriculum to a particular population or a particular group, and you realize that it does not fit that society, it does not fit that group, because the needs of that group or society was not taken into consideration when the curriculum was being designed or planned. Now, formulation of objectives. So, having diagnosed the needs of the learner, having diagnosed the needs of the society, the next step is now to formulate objectives that will help us to achieve or help us to solve the problems that the society or the learners are facing. And so, to provide an essential platform for curriculum development, the objectives must be clear and comprehensive. We must set clear objectives. They must be comprehensive. The objectives shouldn't be ambiguous, so that we find it difficult to get the meaning of the stated objective. And the objectives, we know, determine what content is important and how it should be organized. So based on the objective, we can know the type of content that can help us to achieve the stated objective. Now, selection and organization of content. So having stated the various objectives, then we must now select content. We must organize the content in such a way that they can help us to achieve the intended objectives. And so selection and organization of content involve some criteria. And these criteria include validity and significance. And the next one is the making of proper distinctions between the various levels of content and decisions about the level of development and when to introduce it. So in validity, we talk about to what extent does the various objectives, various content help us to achieve the intended objective. Then, so for example, like we have been stating this example when we were looking at Tyler's model, we said that if you want to teach Kirchhoff's law, you must first of all teach or introduce students to simple electrical circuits. If this is not done, the learners will find it difficult to understand Kirchhoff's law. Now let's look at selection and organization of learning experiences. So selecting and organizing learning experiences also involves strategies of concept attainment as well as sequence information of attitudes. So what methodologies, what pedagogical approaches can help learners to achieve the intended objective, and also how to translate the content to be learned into appropriate learning experiences. How do we ensure that the various content that has been selected, these activities can help us to achieve or can help us to go through the content with ease, and at the end help to achieve the intended learning outcome. And also how to project learning experiences that accommodate variations in ability to learn. So anytime we are selecting and organizing learning experiences, we must take note that in the various classrooms, in the various schools, we have different kind of students. We have average learners, we have slow learners, we have fast learners. All these kind of learners must be considered anytime we are selecting and organizing the learning experiences, which will ensure that students will be able to attain the specified objectives. Now let's look at the final stage or the final phase of Tabet's model, which talks about the determination of how to evaluate and the ways and means of doing it. And in trying to do evaluation, the following questions according to Tabat must be considered. And one question in doing evaluation is, how should the quality of learning be evaluated to assure that the end of education are being observed? So to what extent can we say that the intended objective has been achieved? Which activities will help us to achieve these objectives? And how can we ensure that there is consistency between the aims and objectives actually achieved by students. So that consistency must also be there. So whenever we are doing evaluation, we must also evaluate how consistent the learning experiences, the objectives, the content they are, in order to help learners to achieve the desirable learning outcomes the curriculum seeks to provide. Then, does the curriculum organization provide experiences that offer opportunities for all variety of learners to attain independent goals? So this must also be considered anytime we are doing evaluation. Now let's look at the differences between Tabes and Tyler's model. So looking at the two, you realize that Tyler's model was made up of 4 phases, but Tabes' own is made up of 7 phases. However, both models are linear. Both models are linear, and in both models too, evaluation is a terminal process. It means evaluation occurs at the final stage of the entire planning process. Students, we have looked at Tabes' model of curriculum planning, and we saw that this model is made up of 7 phases, unlike Tyler's model, which was made up of 4 phases. And we also saw that the various phases also assume a linear view, like we saw in Tyler's model. Thank you for joining today's session, and I hope you enjoyed this session. See you in the subsequent session. Bye.